Hi, I'm Deborah, Commissioner of Education. I want to start by thanking you so much for your support. Many of you sent emails and cards when I was out or had your students do that, and I'm very, very grateful for that and glad to be back. This video today is about educator evaluation, and I want to start by just backing up a little bit. In 2009, the educator evaluations for all educators in our state became law. And we spent about a year developing an educator evaluation model for teachers and principals. We piloted that model 2 years ago in 2011. And throughout that time, we had meetings and gathered feedback, and we made significant and numerous improvements to the evaluation model as a result of that feedback. In fact, last year, we even changed from a full year of implementation to a year of gradual implementation to make sure that we were ready. So here we are now, 3 years later, in our year of full implementation. I know that many of you are concerned about the evaluation process, and your feedback is still welcome. It always will be, and we're going to act upon that feedback. I want to start with a reminder about the main purpose of educator evaluation for all educators, from our classroom teachers, principals, all educators, including my own evaluation. The purpose is to provide feedback on our teaching, on our professional practices. Evaluations include many different components that reflect different aspects of our profession. Student learning is one of the key elements of our evaluations. We've heard from you and from your union leaders some feedback on student learning objectives, and that's actually what I want to focus this video on today. And again, I want to reflect back for just a moment. When we worked with our advisory committee on measures of student learning, we opted against creating additional standardized assessments, which might have been easier to implement, but weren't necessarily what we thought would be best. We also opted against imposing targets of student learning upon districts and then schools and then you in your classroom. And instead, we decided to create student learning objectives. The idea was that you would be working individually or with your teams to develop your own student learning objectives. And these would be based on the curriculum in your classroom and on your knowledge of the students in your classroom. Student learning objectives were actually intended to be a primary example of teacher empowerment. It's about respecting your professionalism. Student learning objectives are one way for you to capture and document examples of teaching success. So what we know now is that it's working well in some places, but we also know that some districts and schools are having success with implementation more than others. The concerns that some of you have raised about student learning objectives are understandable and actually expected because this is new territory for all of us. But you've also, in your feedback, provided us with really specific issues and concerns. We hear those, and we want to do everything that we can to make sure that we have evaluations that are implemented fairly and consistently across the state and that are in your best interest and the best interest of your students. We've reviewed the comments that you've shared with us, and in fact, many of us here have read your emails numerous times. And what we've done is begin to pull out some themes from those. So for example, we've heard that in some of your experiences, objectives were imposed upon you without your involvement. We've also heard that in some instances that the work between teachers and evaluators was difficult or time-consuming. We've also heard concerns about consistency of implementation or the level of rigor of student learning objectives and how to set that right level of ambition. It's also troubling to hear that some teachers believe that student learning objectives have actually interfered with teaching and learning, and that there is, in some cases, a disconnect between classroom assessments and student learning objectives. We've also heard that that many seem to believe that assessments are always tests, which of course is not the case. So we're working now in several different ways to get at the root of these concerns and then determine how to move forward. So we're wondering, do we need to provide additional guidance on student learning objectives to districts and schools? Do we need to provide more help with implementation? What do we need to do to improve what we've designed, to streamline, to make changes to the process or the design itself? And what lessons can we learn from schools and districts where it is working well, and how do we share those lessons with others. So I can assure you that we're reviewing all of those suggestions for improvements. We want to make sure that the process and the implementation and the use of student learning objectives is going well. We're also gathering additional information. So for example, we'll be sending out a statewide survey soon to gather additional information from all educators. And I'm meeting with teachers and with principals to get their feedback. We're going to continue to closely monitor the emails that you send us through our Educator evaluation inbox. We've received great feedback already. We're gathering and we're using this information. So, for example, this year is our first year of full implementation, but we do intend to provide some flexibility on the use of student learning objectives. Recently, in Providence, with our support, they decided to base their local personnel decisions on professional practices and responsibilities. This does not mean a change in implementing student learning objectives in the district, but it will be used this year a little bit differently in Providence for local personnel decisions. We're continuing to meet with school leaders, and we'll be providing all districts and schools in the state with some flexibility on the use of student learning objectives for this year for local personnel decisions. Many districts, if not most, will be using student learning objectives this year, but we want to provide some flexibility. I want to be clear that at the statewide level, we will continue to collect information on student learning objectives for eventual use on certification decisions. We plan to continue our conversations with you, with your union leaders, with your principals, with your superintendents, your school committee members, and all educators, and analyze all of that information when we make decisions about the future. We want to continue to monitor all of that feedback. We're going to review everything, and we're going to refine and improve the process of implementation accordingly. We know that to meet our goal of having a system that provides you with actionable and useful feedback, that it has to be high quality and it has to be implemented well. But I'm confident that with your continued partnership, we'll get there.